Michael with United Veterans Worldwide, excited to talk with Ted today. I came across Ted's Instagram and his YouTube channel, and he had some great content, and I really liked his emphasis on coaching people in fitness. And I'm excited today to learn his story, so I want to introduce you today to Ted. Ted, will you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Appreciate it. I'm not a military veteran, but I think there's a lot of parallels between the first responder and specifically law enforcement community with the military. So I was a deputy for 11 years, and I met my wife on the job as well. We have 4 kids now, and I got into fitness earlier before I became a cop, but I got way out of shape as a deputy. I told myself I'd never be that guy, but I became the fat cop. And there's a lot of reasons why that was not good, including high blood pressure and the lack of confidence. And you brought up a point before we started this interview about mental health. And I saw how it directly impacted my mental health. I was depressed at the time, not to mention low on confidence, but I just was not myself. And I didn't realize that actually being out of shape and overweight can significantly impact your mental health and just the quality of your life, more so than just feeling bad about how you look shirtless. But I think we forget that the brain is part of the body and it's all connected in this unit. If we're not taking care of it, we can't perform optimally or just really have the mental health that we'd like ideally. So yeah, I got in good shape through a fitness coach, through the help of my wife, especially, who was my girlfriend at the time. And that opened up my world. I mean, I just felt so much better. My mental health just felt like it improved overnight. Obviously, it was over the course of several months while I lost the weight and got healthy. But I wanted to share that with others. So I started coaching people in my methods, and the popularity just kind of took off. And eventually I ended up retiring from law enforcement in good standing, all as well. But, my fitness coaching kind of path really took over in a number of ways. And it's just been great to see how I've helped a lot of veterans and first responders improve their physical health, their fitness, their performance for on and off the job. But, to your point on mental health, it helps so many people just feel better and lose the depression and anxiety and PTSD symptoms, in most cases without medication, just taking care of their fitness and health. So I've really enjoyed that aspect a lot.
Yeah, awesome. And there's a couple of things I want to touch on here, but I have to make mention of your mustache. It might be the most recognizable mustache on Instagram. I love it when your posts come across. So well done.
Thanks. That's the purpose behind it. Actually, it is to be recognizable. It's like, McDonald's has the M, and I have the mustache. It just helps people go, oh, there's that dude with the stash. What's he talking about?
Yeah.
Hopefully they spend a couple of seconds to learn more about our fitness program.
Yeah, brilliant marketing, brother. Brilliant marketing. So
yeah. If
we go back in time a little bit and we look at, you talked about an 11-year career as a deputy, as a police officer. What brought you into the force? What brought you into having a career of service?
Well, good question. My dad actually, this may sound odd because I'm only 37 years old, but my dad was in World War II in the Army. Yep. And my biological father, I think he was 67 when he conceived me, which is pretty noteworthy, right? But his service in the Army really kind of motivated me to serve. And, I got really into the GI Joes and stuff, as like a lot of boys do. But what's funny, Mike? My dad told me from as early as I can remember, he's like, man, don't join the military. Don't go to war. He saw a lot of horrors. He fought on the front lines of World War II. It messed him up. He kept his Army jacket in his trunk. Anytime he had a bad day, he would literally open his trunk, look at the jacket and go, man, at least I'm not back, on the front lines. But I still had that kind of desire to serve in some way. And I honestly wanted to see action. I mean, that might sound silly, but maybe a lot of your listeners can resonate with that. Like, I used to watch, cops on TV kicking down doors, chasing bad guys, getting in shootouts, and that honestly looked awesome to me.
Yeah,
I was like, I want to be a hero. I want to be the guy that gets in the fights and the shootings and saves the day. And my dad literally was like, I'll disown you if you join the military. And I don't want to be that guy, but I definitely still kind of wanted to. But props to those who actually served. Don't want to take away from them. But I said, you know what? Fine, I'll be a cop. That sounds cool. It's sort of paramilitary, right? You still get to wear a cool uniform and be the hero and all that. So those were my original intentions, to be quite honest. Over time things change as you get older, you get married, you have kids. Maybe it's not the best idea to put my life on the line necessarily. That helped me transition careers. But yeah, that's kind of how I originally got into it.
Yeah, I think that does resonate with me and my story as well. I remember from early on, my brother and I had G.I. Joes, and I still kept mine. He got rid of his. I've still got him in the basement.
Yeah, awesome.
We played war all the time. My dad was an Air Force officer. He served like an 8-year career, role, and got out. And he didn't get out on the best of terms during the time. I think he was pushed out because he didn't make the next rank. They had a lot of cutbacks in the service at that time in the early 80s or late 80s, I should say. And he always told me, he's like, yeah, I don't want you to ever, or any of my kids to serve. It was hard. It was rough. And I remember that one time when I was in high school, I got something in the mail, and it was a West Point flyer that said, hey, we want to invite you to apply to West Point. And I was like, whoa, this is exciting. And she's like, that's the 8th one. And she tears it up and she throws it out, right? And I ended up serving a mission from my church and came home and ended up feeling that inner call to serve. And so I did without my parents' permission. I didn't need it. I was old enough. And I launched into my military career at that point. And I remember my mom crying, and she's like, you're going to regret it. And I think our parents knew things that we couldn't have known without them really sitting us down and talking about the experiences, which is why I do this channel in a lot of ways for my kids' benefit too, to see and hear these things, not to dissuade them from joining, but to say there is a cost to service. There's a cost to being a first responder, a police officer. There's a cost in trauma. There's a cost in not being able to cope with those traumas and pushing things down. There's a cost to an expense to mental health, chronic pain. I could go on and on and on, right? There is a cost. But I salute you for doing this service. And I'm curious, why do you think police officers get to a point where they get out of shape while they're still serving?
Yeah, I think it's tempting in life to look for a singular cause, because then we have an easier solution, right? It's just this one thing we got to fix. You see that in marketing too a lot of time. Oh, it's just this one thing. We got this one solution for you. And I think it's multifaceted. I think there's a lot of reasons they got to get out of shape. I think a lot of it is emotional, and a lot of cops don't want to talk about this. A lot of first responders and veterans don't want to admit. Yeah. But it's a strong coping mechanism. I mean, eating food instantly brings the brain the happy chemicals, and it becomes a source of comfort for people, whether they realize it or not. I think there's a lot of times other issues too, where the job is oftentimes sedentary. I think the culture is pretty bad too. They kind of almost glorify eating crappy food and making the gas station runs. And so, yeah, I mean, I think the emotional side of it's big. I think the nature of the job itself is difficult with shift work and trying to balance family life. And, okay, how do you fit in working out and meal prep with all that? It can feel very overwhelming. Yeah. And also, I don't think the education is very good. And there's parallels, I think, between law enforcement academies, fire department academies, and, military, because sure, they'll yell at you and have you run and do push-ups, and that amount of stress and just limiting your food as they do is going to cause people to lose weight and get in better shape, but it doesn't necessarily translate to a lifestyle that they can take with them and use. So, I talk to guys all the time. I mean, a lot of my clients are veterans, and they'll talk about, sure, yeah, I can lose weight. I know how to run, do push-ups, but they're also associating that with punishment. Right. And that's a huge problem I have with a lot of academies and boot camps and whatnot, is like, oh, you screwed up. exercise. You screwed up, exercise.
Yeah.
No, I think punishments make sense, but maybe we could explore some other options. I don't know, maybe writing assignments, maybe doing some manual labor. But yeah, I think there's also that aspect is subconsciously they're thinking about exercise as something you don't want to do, as a punishment, as something you want to avoid. And it can be hard to break out of that. So yeah, there's a lot of issues going on there, right? But I think those are some of the more common ones.
Yeah, and I would say that guys I've heard that have gotten out of the service, the military, and I even said it myself. I said, I'm never going to run again. We ran every morning, 5 to 6 days a week. And I had certain commanders who were 125 pounds, and they would just take off and run 5 miles, and we'd have to chase them. And I was 200 pounds, right? And it was like, this is the worst thing in life. But I heard guys say, I'm never going to work out. I'm never going to do push-ups again. I'm never going to do these things. And I like the fact that you've touched on the mental health with emotional eating. I think I got to a point where I was doing the same thing. I was still waking up in the morning and hitting the gym really hard, but then I would stuff all of this crap into my body, having no idea that there was a connection between the gut and the brain health. And so as I struggled with a traumatic brain injury from an explosion in Iraq and falling out of planes or whatever, my brain started to deteriorate. My memory started to lapse really badly. It increased the PTSD or depression, anxiety, all these things, having no idea that so much of it was linked to food. And you touched on that point, which is so critical. We can't just talk physical movement, although movement is medicine. You can't just do that without putting the proper fuel into that system to make the whole process run better.
100%. And I'll tell you, like, when I'm working with clients, one of the first things they tell me as far as results, and this is oftentimes within a week or two, they're like, I feel so much happier and I have so much more energy. And what has changed? I mean, primarily their nutrition. And I think we've all heard the cliche term, food is fuel and fuel your body. Like, that now it just is noise and it doesn't mean anything, but it's so true and it's so essential. Just the notion, as you said, the gut health, what you consume creates who you are. Your body turns that food into you. It regenerates cells, right? And it helps shuttle nutrients from one place to another to provide fuel for the body and brain. So it's not just calories in, calories out, people. It's the quality of the food you're eating as well. So yeah, that's huge. I mean, I hear it all the time before they see the big physical results. Man, I'm so much happier. My energy, my productivity, it's crazy. I'm even cutting back on caffeine now. I don't feel like I need that. I mean, I just hear that on repeat all the time. So yeah, I mean, that's just proof right there how important the nutrition is.
Yeah, and I love that you're mentioning these things. I'm a very visual person, and you talk about food is you. It regenerates, it forms into your cells, it puts it back into your skin, it does all these things, like it becomes you. That's an incredible visual. The other visual is of your father, who, man, hats off to him for serving in World War II. I regret that I didn't start this channel much earlier in my life, where I could talk to World War II veterans and learn their stories. But for him to have that sense to go to his trunk and look at that jacket and say, there was difficult. What I'm doing now is doable. I absolutely love that. Oh my goodness. What a powerful visual.
Yeah, World War II vets are literally a dying breed, right? There can't be that many left. And what a generation, and what a war too. We haven't had a war quite like it since, right? Where the bad guy is like pretty well defined as a bad guy, right? And they even have the black uniforms with skulls on them. I mean, but anyways, yeah, he had a ton of amazing stories. I actually wrote them down. I could probably publish it one day. Great stories.
Yeah, that'd be interesting to read. I'm often curious, when we transitioned into Iraq and Afghanistan and we were fighting a uniformless battle, why we didn't involve police units from across the world who do that same work on a daily basis. fighting bad guys without uniforms and saying, how do you do it? How do you approach a door? Not knowing whether that's a bad guy or a good guy because there's not a uniform that'll determine that. But you guys face that every day. You pull someone over in their car having no idea what that person's mental state is before you go up to their window. That is terrifying.
Yeah, it can be. I mean, it can be kind of exciting too, right? And that would have been younger Ted would have been like, man, this is cool. You never know what you're going to get into. But I mean, yeah, once reality hits and thankfully I didn't see personally too much traumatic stuff. There's nothing that necessarily keeps me up at night. But, I work with first responders all around the country. And yeah, it doesn't take more than one incident where, you think you're doing a normal car stop and you're in a fight for your life to change your psyche for good. And that PTSD is very real where it's kind of so ingrained now that the next loud noise and the next person I encounter could be my life. How could that not change you?
Yeah. My respect for first responders has gone up drastically since starting this channel 5 months ago. I've interviewed many who have experienced several traumatic events per shift, which is a crazy thought because mine, I think over the time of a year in combat in Iraq or whatever, and I can pinpoint several, but over a shift. And there's also a thing with first responders, and you can correct me, but it's very similar in parallels to military too, where we'll go to a country, we'll sit and wait, and then there's action, and we fight, and then it's done. And we sit and we wait and we sit and we wait. And then there's action. And I think police first responders have that same pattern where there's a lot of downtime, not much happening, and then immediate action. And it can end up breaking the fight or flight system in our body, our internal system of fight or flight, where it doesn't shut off, where we constantly stay in that heightened operational tempo. You get off of a bad scene at night, let's say on a fire, and you go home at night. You don't forget what happened that night, so it's still on. And you go back the next day and you face the next one, and it's just on and on, that cycle. One of the things a firefighter told me when I first interviewed him months ago is he said, "Do you ever have anxiety?" And I said, "Yeah, I freaking battle anxiety every day." He's like, "Well, what do you do?" I said, "Well, I was taking meds for a long time and then I stopped because it was having too many side effects." And he's like, "So what do you do?" I said, "Just kind of suck it up and deal with it." He's like, "You ever cold plunged?" And I was like, "I have one. I don't use it." And he's like, "When you have anxiety, go out and cold plunge because it resets your nervous system and can reset the brain and you'll come out of that without the anxiety." And I said, "There's no way that freaking works." No doctor's ever told me that. There's no way that works. Well, it worked. It worked.
That's amazing. Well, and just to piggyback off that, no doctor points that out. Well, unfortunately, like modern medicine, there's so much money involved in the treatment, right? And telling you to do a cold plunge makes nobody money, unfortunately, right? So, man, that's another can of worms we could open up. But amount of doctors who've told my clients just the most awful advice. The status quo is no advice. Oh, gotcha. Here's your pill, right? There's nothing about changing their lifestyle or anything else. But then the ones that actually do want to try to dip in a lot of times and give some lifestyle advice, sometimes it's just trash and it's so bad. And unfortunately, we have a lot of people will say, "Oh, hey, they're a doctor. Of course, you got the credibility, you have that title, but that doesn't necessarily mean that this person is equipped to treat you." But yeah, that's a side note, but yeah. It's definitely another problem out there.
Yeah, that's an important one. We could have a whole panel discussion on that for sure, because that's big. I hope that the new presidency, the new appointments will make some dent in that system. I hope. I mean, what else do I have but hope?
Let's hope. That'd be great.
Yeah, it would be. So if I were to summarize your 11-year career, what moments really stand out as the most memorable moments for you as a police officer?
Wow, that's a great question. So I'll just go with, as you said, memorable, what comes to mind, right? I'll never forget my wife waking me up at 4 a.m. and she said, "Oh, Sergeant Helis got killed last night." And I was like, "What?" And that was my main Sarge. He was like my supervisor for a couple of years. And I quickly learned that there was an active shooter event in my hometown on my beat, and 13 people died.
Oh my gosh.
I hope I'm not wrong on that. I want to say 13. Obviously that's bad if I'm forgetting a number there, but that was shocking. And what was shocking about it is he was the guy that always said in briefing, yeah, it's going to happen. We're going to have an active shooter. You never know when. Got to be ready. And she's like, okay, so you're going to go back to bed? I was like, no, there's no chance I could go to sleep now. I probably need to get to work. And yeah, so that was huge, because in Ventura County where I worked, it's mostly a very safe area. I didn't get into a shooting in my entire career. I pulled my gun, I got into fights, I tased, I pepper sprayed, I got, foot pursuits, but and dead bodies and all that. But like, it's a relatively safe area. And as you said, there's first responders who go through several traumatic events in a shift.
Yeah.
I work with some cops who tell me about, every week a fight, a shooting, like stabbing, a suicide, like the number of things they see is just nuts. But yeah, that moment was really big. And it was eye-opening for a lot of reasons. And I could go on and on about borderline, but that was, one thing what was striking about that event, and I know you asked about my whole career, now I'm focusing on one event, but I just got to talk about it.
Go for it.
Yeah, well, there's this saying by this guy, Brooke Westcott. It's something like, it's something to the effect of, when a critical incident occurs, that's where somebody's true measure shows up. It's not, that's when you're really going to prove how you've been spending all your time. So Sergeant Helis was like really quick to get in the door in that incident. And he was the kind of guy that always talked about training and mental exercises and visualizing, what would you do in this situation? What are your first actions? Okay, you get that call.
Yep.
So he was ready. He was ready. He was the tip of the spear too. He went in, he could have told other people, hey, you go. He went in first. He actually ended up, he got shot several times by the shooter and ended up ultimately getting killed by friendly fire, which is wild. But a lot of people too that day didn't do jack shit, not to talk smack. And yes, I wasn't there. Who knows, what I would have done, right? I can imagine, or I can gesture and say what I would have done, but I'll just speak to what was done. And there was a lot of people who didn't do much. Okay. And should have moved faster, should have taken action, should have rushed in to get Sergeant Helis while he's laying there. And this incident opened my eyes to how poorly trained first responders are just in general. Yeah. And I'll say, I think Ventura County does great in terms of, in general, good training. I think officers are better equipped and better trained than probably the majority of departments in the U.S. But to be quite honest, in working with a bunch of first responders and cops and firefighters and EMTs, like, the training is not good enough. And I can even think back to when I was fresh on the streets, and you're talking about what are memorable moments. And just, I remember one time doing a warrant service, and we busted through the door. And I hit it with my battering ram, busted in, and I immediately go in, okay? And they're all like, Stern, that's my last name. Stern, get back here. Stern. My partners are yelling at me. What? They're like, don't go in yet. Like, oh, okay. Well, you know what my training was on busting doors and going in was cops on TV and war movies. And what do? The moment they bust through a door, they go in.
You start clearing. Yeah.
You just go in and start clearing. But no. In this one, since they could have had weapons, whatever, you call them out. Ventura County Sheriff's Department, everybody come out with your hands up. That's how they wanted to do it. That was missed in the training. That was missed in whatever. And my life was in danger because I just followed what I knew. And they all shook their head like, I can't believe you went in. I'm like, no one ever told me what the action plan was. And I just assumed once you hit the door, we all go in.
Wow.
So anyways, there's a lot of memorable moments, Mike, like, there's a lot of cheesy ones, like just returning a wallet and how grateful someone was, or finding somebody's kid who ran away.
Yeah.
Talking somebody off of an overpass who wanted to end it. Like, I got lots of memories like that. But as I reflect on my career, you're asking me to reflect on it. I just think about how much better I could have been trained, how much better our partners need to be trained, along with veterans. And this is what veterans have been screaming about, the lack of care from the VA and whatnot. We need to take better care of the people who are in the most important professions in America. Veterans and first responders have to be at the top of the list for the most important professions in America. Why aren't we taking care of them with everything we got, providing them mental health services, providing them support in their fitness, giving them better education in those things, right? Giving them better training, more training. But it ultimately comes down to the money. And are we going to provide the money for the training and provide the overtime for the training and provide the money for the people who are going to be the experts supporting them on their mental and physical health? So yeah, hopefully with this new administration, we'll see some more of that, right? But yeah, that's if you're asking me to reflect and maybe what's relevant on this podcast, it's taking care of our own and in the most important ways.
Wow, dude, that was a lot. There was a whole lot there that you just talked about.
Sorry, there's a lot.
But so important, Ted. You touch on these important aspects that really resonate with me. I interviewed a guy who was a veteran of Somalia, a Canadian. Served there right before everything went to hell, and we lost guys in the Battle of Mogadishu, et cetera, et cetera. And he came out with some illnesses from taking the malarial pills that were given to them to the Canadian Army. Plagued with the psyche, guys were killing themselves. It was just craziness, and they wouldn't fess up to the fact that the pills were the cause of some of that psyche issue. And he says, Michael, doing what you're doing on your channel, he travels across the country and talks to veterans face to face in his van. And he says, the best care that I've ever received is veteran to veteran or first responder to veteran or vice versa. We take care of each other better than any administration, any government. So, Ted, what you're doing on your channel, I love, which is why I wanted to have you on this one, is you are putting yourself out there, getting into the trenches, helping people pull that one lever, maybe two levers, fitness and nutrition, which impacts the mental health lever. And there's no other way to get this done this way, because it's not being done at the government level to help us stem the tide of suicide for veterans, first responders. It's us doing it for each other, right? And I'm saddened to hear about your friend, your sergeant who was killed in action. There's no greater death sometimes for a warrior than to end that way. But sometimes it's unnecessary, right? We just think, was there no other way to do this? I watched that first responder, that active shooter event that took place, I think, in Texas. It was a school. Maybe there were two different ones, but there was a first one that happened, and all the police were in the hallway, but nobody was going down and clearing the hall.
Yeah,
and they just, yeah,
Uvalde, I believe. Right?
And they just stood there, and I was pulling my hair out. I was like, I, by myself, would have taken my M4, and I would have cleared all of those rooms to get before they killed one more kid. And everybody stood there. Now, and I'm not gonna call them cowards. I'm not gonna do that stuff. But maybe the training for violence to action wasn't prepared. Your response, Ted, was violent to action. Somebody's in there, there's hostilities, you kick the door down, you start to clear the freaking room. Right? You eliminate the target that's there that's causing the violence. And then the second event were two veterans who were serving on a police unit who entered the school, and they ran into that building, ran up those stairs, turned that hallway, lifted up, the gun pointed at them, they took the shot and took out the person who was doing the assailing. The exact right thing to do. And it frustrates me that there's a lack of training, but it's not uncommon to, Ted, for reservists, National Guard, who do a weekend a month, 2 weeks out of a year doing training, and then they're deployed. And they suffered some of the largest losses of life in Iraq and Afghanistan, primarily because of being undertrained, underfunded. And it doesn't surprise me that that would happen on a police force, especially in the age in which we live today, where there's so much foolery going on and saying we don't even need police. What? I don't understand that for 1 second. Why would you never want security in your home or your neighborhood, right? Like, you got me going.
Yeah, well, in that, back to that quote, it says something about like courage is not really within you; it's what you've been doing.
Oh.
And I think a lot of people say, "Well, see, I'm courageous," or they're not courageous, and whatever. And it's not necessarily this quality you're born with. Maybe there's some aspect there. Maybe there is some genetic component, but surely it has mostly to do with experience, right?
Muscle memory.
This may sound absolutely stupid, and I'm sure some people are going to roll their eyes, but like as a kid, I played a ton of paintball. And paintball is not real life, and you're not going to die, but
it hurts.
You're holding a gun, you're shooting, it hurts. Yeah. But I was trained in a lot of these instances to like attack, right? And attack. And I played video games, a lot of shooter video games. And one of my problems as a new cop was rushing into things. I would rush in. Because I just thought that's what a hero does.
Yeah.
And I think there are times where that could be good, but a lot of times that's dumb. And you should wait back, and you should, pause and give some time to think and come up with a good action plan. But to my point is that we need to have training that simulates, that encourages action when it's needed, and also training to, hey, we need to pause and we need to like give this a second. And we did a handful of scenarios in the academy, and we had this use of force simulator, which was really cool. There's a big screen, and you shoot at it, and there's noises, and it's kind of lifelike.
Yeah, I've used it.
Okay, right. And we spent hardly any time with that. And we spent way more time marching. Okay. And I'm not trying to say there's no value to marching, but I would say there's more value to scenario training.
Yeah.
And we need to train, like you just mentioned, when you have military that's undertrained, it causes a loss of life. It's devastating. And we see this with first responders, with Uvalde, with other shootings and examples where cops are sitting around not doing it because they're scared and they're not sure what to do. And then they're looking at their partners who are also not doing anything. Okay, they're not doing anything either, so I guess I don't need to. No, we need more training, right? So, yeah, I mean, I guess luckily video games and paintball and stuff like helped me kind of be that guy that wants to rush in. But at the same time, I didn't have enough training to slow down and to maybe not always try to be the hero. And maybe that's not always the smartest thing to do. But we need good training on both ends, and there's just not enough of it. Yeah.
My Navy SEAL buddy has a Instagram channel, Vanilla Gorilla. I gotta say it right. But he does his business is training first responders on clearing rooms, clearing buildings, active shooter scenarios, and I love that he's sharing his knowledge, his skill set with police forces today to help them get up to speed on the current threats that exist today.
I think I've seen that channel. It's cool.
Yeah, he's really a cool guy. So let's fast forward a little bit, and I want to thank you for your service, by the way, Ted. Thank you for entering that field and protecting your space there in Ventura. What took you here? What brought you to Utah?
I'll say thanks, but my level of service doesn't compare to some of these other first responders who have dealt with a ton of tragedy and veterans who've really dealt with real war. What brought me to Utah is the question. Yeah. So I was in Southern California, and when Fit Responder took off, I'm like, well, if we do this full time, I could live anywhere. We don't have to live in California. My wife's brother lives in Heber, Utah.
Yeah.
So we visited him, and we're like, this place, Utah, is awesome.
Yeah. Good ice cream shop there.
Did they have a good ice cream shop there?
In Heber, yeah.
You'll have to let me know. My kids like ice cream, of course. But California, that was right around the time where they started to at least talk about potentially forcing kids to get vaccinated to go back to school. Mm-hmm. And I was like, nope, we're out. F this.
Yep.
Now, I have nothing against people who decided that the vaccine was right for them or their kids, but what I am saying is that I feel as a parent, I deserved the right to decide what kind of medical care or preventative measures I wanted my kids to undertake. I felt the COVID vaccine was too new, too risky at the time.
Yep.
In my personal risk versus reward calculation. So we were out because that was right around the time they were talking about it. And we're like, I'm done with this crap. Also, the taxes are absurd in California. And in Southern California, especially, is just getting worse and worse. What Gavin Newsom's doing in that state is just horrific.
Yep.
The homelessness, the crime, the filth. It's just disgusting.
It is.
I really enjoyed how Utah. I mean, there's a lot of LDS here. Mm-hmm. That's a great culture. I'm not LDS, but I admire a lot of aspects of that culture. They tend to be hardworking, clean, good neighbors.
Yeah.
Good manners, traditional moral values, conservative. Sign me up. I was like, yeah, this is awesome. So
yeah,
we've been very happy here in Utah so far.
And how long have you been here?
Since 21. So just over 3 years.
Yeah, I think we moved here either in 20 or 21. My wife was originally born and raised here, but we live in Logan, so we're up north in the mountain here. But
yeah, where are you guys from originally?
My dad was Air Force. I was born in Alaska, and we moved all over the world with him. I ended up going to school in Washington State, like junior high school graduation. And then I've just continued to live all over the country when I served for the 17 and a half years before I got wounded. And so my brother's in California. He's actually a city manager there. My sister's here in Bountiful, so we're all close now, close-ish. But yeah, no, love it here. I love looking out my windows and seeing the mountains surround this little valley here. It's just a little piece of heaven.
Yeah.
So let's talk some of the positives here. I talk about 5 things primarily as the levers to pull for veterans, first responders who are struggling with their mental health. I talk about fitness. I talk about nutrition. I talk about mental health, whether that's therapy or it's other elements to mental health. I talk about spirituality, not necessarily religion, but I talk about improving your spirit, right? And then I talk about making connections with others. When we silo, when we isolate, it brings that spiral of depression. And I think that's we're seeing is the trend where people are pushing themselves towards that line of suicide. And making connections is such a pivotal part of my progress in healing. Can you tell me some of your experiences of your connections, what you're doing with coaching?
Yeah. Do you mean connections in terms of like mental health in the coaching aspect, or?
I mean, since we talked that fitness improves mental health, what experiences are you having in that fitness realm that is making a difference for everybody?
Yeah, certainly. So I've struggled with depression for as long as I can remember. Literally as early as I can remember, I would have thoughts like, maybe it's better off to be dead. You know, it's like you're sleeping, and there's nothing wrong with sleeping, you know, and you know, nothing too crazy, but my parents got divorced. My mom was an abusive alcoholic, and I don't want to, you know, ask for any tears here, but maybe those were some of the contributing factors to my personal depression. But I've always noticed that when I take care of some of the basics, a lot of those levers you just mentioned, I started to feel better, you know, and I just noticed with myself personally that when I was out of shape and not focusing on the right kind of nutrition and not training, that's when depression creeps in again. Just last year, I remember I started to get down that rabbit hole again and did what you said, isolated, stopped talking to people. I mean, all of my social media stuff was just felt like I had to for my business.
Yeah.
But one of my buddies was like, and actually one of the coaches on my team, Luke, was like, hey, dude, when's the last time you just took a walk outside and got off your phone and just spent like 30 minutes just walking and thinking? I'm like, wow, it's been a long time. Do that. How's your food, man? I was like, it could be better. He goes, I really want you to like sharpen that. Let's focus on whole foods, get in protein. And he's like, dude, why don't you start talking, like hang out with people? I'm like, I don't need friends. Just do it. Like, just call up one of your buddies, just go hang out, get some laughs in. And that simple advice really, really pulled me out of a hole. I was like, I kind of knew that he was telling the truth. And sometimes you just need, and a lot of people, okay, not to digress, but a lot of people say, hey, I don't need a coach. I know what to do. But that's another instance where I knew those things, but it did take an outside perspective, another pair of eyes to say, hey, man, why don't you please do this? And it took that little nudge for me to do it. Even though I knew those tips that he told me, I would have said those same things to a client if they asked me, how can I start feeling better? But that pulled me out of it. But I've just seen how there's the biological aspect, like we said, behind the nutrition and fitness. It gives you a machine, a body that's working optimally, and that leads to the brain's performance. Then there's also just the way it translates to life. I mean, when you look better in your clothes, it ends up helping you feel more confident, which ends up helping you feel more productive, which ends up helping you accomplish things that make you feel proud, that make you feel like you have fulfillment and purpose in life. So I think it all comes full circle. I think it's a lot of those simple levers you talked about, like just having networking and coaching and talking to people, therapy. It's taking care of the fitness. It's taking care of the nutrition. And it's seeing how those things play out in your life that can improve your mental health. But I haven't come across a client who's gotten in great shape and said, man, I feel worse. Every single one says, man, I feel happier. I'm in a better space because of it.
Yeah, so true. So true. I'm so glad that you had a friend who could see the symptoms and could recommend something so basic. Because those are the people who have saved my life in so many ways. Hey, let's just go get a workout in. Nah, dude, I'm not wanting to do anything right now because I'm sitting alone in a dark room and I'm isolating from everyone in my home. Like, nah, I'm going to come pick you up. Let's go. Get me out of the house, get me doing something. And it suddenly like wakens me up again. And it's like, whoa, I don't have to linger in this depressive state, right? Like, I love the fact that you felt that from somebody close to you. We all need someone like that.
Well, and you bring up a good point too, Mike, is that, all of us have the power to help somebody in need. And it's not like you necessarily need a degree or need to do something special for them. And I think a lot of people listening might think, well, what can I do that's special that's really going to help somebody with their depression? But sometimes it could literally just be a conversation over coffee that could change somebody's life. It could be a sentence that you exchange with them that sparks something new, that gives them a new perspective. So yeah, we shouldn't downplay how effective just simple interaction and kindness and insisting that, no, let's go do something positive, man. Like, fine, you don't want to go work out with me? Well, I'm going to be parked outside your house. You'll see my car. I'm there. So let's go. Do me a favor as a friend. Let's go. Simple things like that. I've heard that from clients so many times. Like, Ted, you have no idea how just you being there to hear me with my challenges has changed everything for me. That's a good call to action for everyone listening. Like, look for the signs and symptoms. If you have a friend who's, they stop posting on social media. They're not going to social events, and you haven't heard from them in a while. Just check in, have a 5-minute conversation, try to get some, see if you can read into what they're talking about. And if they need help, just start talking to them and hang out and be an ear to listen to them. That can change their life.
Yeah. I've got a friend like that. His name's Peter. He was my workout buddy when I was going through the darkest part of PTSD and figuring out what was really going on with me. Worked out with me every morning at 5 a.m. And he lives in Wyoming. And he reached out to me recently. And just a quick text made all the difference in my day. I'm glad that you re-emphasized that because it's such a critical part of us helping each other out. Ted, it has been an incredible discussion today with you. You've shared so many wonderful things. I've taken a page of notes. I absolutely love some of these visuals that are going to stay with me the rest of the day. Thanks for what you do and what you have done and what you continue to contribute to this military and veterans and first responders who need a lifeline of encouragement. And keep up the good work, brother. And if you ever need a friend, I'm here for you. That's my commitment. So.
Oh, likewise, man. This has been a super cool conversation. I love your mission, and hopefully we can help at least one person that heard this today. And they can maybe pass on the positivity. Appreciate
Perfect.
that.
All right, brother. Thanks very much for joining today.
Thanks so much, Mike.
All right.